Hello, my name is Derek Macpherson. I'm President and CEO of Gold 79 Mines. Here with me today is Rob Johansing, our Vice President of Exploration. And we're here to talk about our Phase 2 drill results, which were just released. So our first slide here is the summary of the drill results. And I'd refer everyone to the press release to look at these numbers in detail. I think the overall, from our perspective, and we'll get into the details, but 23 and 24, holes 23 and 24, we were able to replicate, sort of Tyro style mineralization, sort of what we were expecting to hit, and were very good holes. Hole 28 was very exciting because we hit some very high grade material, something we hadn't seen before, into what is effectively a new high grade zone, discovered what is effectively a new high grade zone. And then Sheep Trail and Boulevard, we intersected broad zones of low-grade mineralization, not quite what we expected, and we'll talk a little bit about that later as well. So first up, we're going to talk about, so here we are at Tyro. So these are all the holes that we've drilled at Tyro to date. Remember, Gold 79 hasn't drilled that many holes. And then we're looking here at a plan view showing the drill holes and the results. Rob, maybe put in context, the results that we got from this program, and how that compared to some of the historic holes and the underground and the sampling that you've done.
You bet, Derek. Well, holes 23 and 24 were designed as a step out laterally and vertically between our sampling last year and the 200 level of the Tyro Mine. So the results that we achieved here in 23 of 44.2 meters of 2 grams is a bit wider than we anticipated, but the grades are consistent. They were a little bit higher in the workings, but nonetheless very consistent as a broad zone of quartz veining. 50 meters to the south in hole 24. And again, these distances are across the vein, but not perpendicular. So they're not true widths, but they're not too far off, probably within 15 to 20%. But on 24, we saw close to 26 meters at 2.25 grams. And again, consistent grades across the zone up to, well, actually in 24, we had just a little above 14 grams in one of the samples. But again, broad zones consistent with what we've seen. We moved to the south, holes 25 and 26, broad zones of mineralization, a little different in appearance. And then owing to some mapping that we were doing while we were drilling and some observations from previous working, I thought I would rotate the rig close to 90 degrees to our sections in the previous drilling, because I was observing a swarm of veins roughly north-south trending and following what I refer to as the White Spar Fault, and they were dipping to the west. So I took hole 27. We drilled about 10, 15 meters, lost the hole in what was probably a historical stope, small, but nonetheless it created issues for the rig. Moved the rig slightly and then drilled hole 28 to the northeast, where we were in mineralization pretty much from start to finish. And as you can see here, it's a broad zone over the entire width, 85 meters of pretty strong veining. But in particular, there were several meters down between 60 and 70 meters where the veining was much stronger, close to 75, 80% quartz. And then we achieved some very high grades, including one sample up to 282 grams of gold. And then that was bookended by some other grades that were north of 20 grams. So we ended up with 3.1 meters of 151.6 grams. So those are high grades. Again, in this part of the world, this part of the world is known for locally some very high grades. And so, it's not surprising, but nonetheless, when you achieve it, it's pretty satisfying.
So Rob, let's talk a little bit more about hole 28 and the White Spar Fault, and why we sort of drilled perpendicular to our other holes.
Well, after seeing the results of holes 23 through 26, albeit they were hitting strong vein, all of them, I looked at those. I looked at the style of veining in the southern holes, 25 and 26, and looked more carefully at the veining at the surface between lines 250 and 300. And it's very clear there that it's a swarm of northwest to north-south trending veins. And additional mapping while we were drilling sort of highlighted the importance of the white spar fault at this particular spot in the Tyro vein system. So I decided to rotate the rig from the top of Decimal Hill and drilled across and underneath the swarm of veins. The hole went well. It was well mineralized all the way down until we got to one structure at about 85 meters. And we were afraid of sticking the rods. They were already sticking. So we decided to cut the hole. At that time, I had no idea that we would have drilled what we did see there, at least, especially between 61 and 70 meters, where we encountered 9 meters of 51 grams, bracketing a zone of up to 1.5 meters of 282 grams. But again, the entire package that we drilled was well mineralized, and it's nice to see these types of results.
Okay. Let's go on to take a step back to 23 and 24, maybe that more typical Tyro mineralization. Maybe talk a little bit about what you saw and how it might relate to some of the holes that we've drilled in 2021.
Okay, the results in 23 and 24 are very consistent with what we've seen not only in the 200 level shown on the section from mapping and sampling we did last year, but also to the drilling we did in 2021 in the northeast part of the vein system, several hundred meters to the northeast. There we see section after section, a very repeatable zone of veining from 15 to 25 meters wide, containing from 1.5 to 2.5 grams over the entire width. So what we are seeing here is a zone of several hundred meters of sheeted or parallel quartz veinlets mixed with adularia and calcite that are containing, respectable gold grades in the 2.5 gram range. It's encouraging in that, I'm looking forward to going a little deeper here and seeing what goes on, because I anticipate that this zone of veining will coalesce into stronger veins. Perhaps the package will narrow a bit, but I also believe that there's a high opportunity of seeing higher grades in this particular zone. And I think in light of our results in hole 28, I think we can be optimistic about our chances of hitting higher grades at depth, like you would expect in many epithermal systems. Now, looking at the entirety of the Tyro vein system, that's not necessarily true, but this is kind of our historical perspective over the past 2 years as we've developed this model and gained knowledge on it. But you can see here on the right part of the section, or to the northeast, you can see our 2021 drilling, where we encountered, via 4 holes, good grades and widths across the vein system that matched very nicely with our sampling of some historic trenches there. And so it's behaving very well. We have not drilled between there and the historic open cut at the Tyro Mine until, we haven't drilled. But you can see on this particular drawing the results from holes 23 through 28. And again, 28 is drilled parallel to the section. But I want to emphasize that, one of my concerns is drilling parallel to a section. But we were prepared to drill from the opposite side of the section just to assure that we were understanding the dips of the vein. But in light of the cross-cutting white spar fault, we had to drill perpendicular to the holes, the historical holes, to assure that we weren't drilling parallel to what could be an important transverse structure. Now, just to expand on this a little bit, going to the northeast or to the right on this longitudinal section, we know that the Tyro vein system passes underneath a broad area, a few hundred meters of alluvial wash before it encounters the Frisco Mine Fault, which is the southwestern flank of our Frisco Graben target. The Tyro vein emerges in the hanging wall of the Frisco Mine Fault is a broad zone of quartz silica hematite alteration that we are now just starting to get a feeling for. So we believe that it's a very prospective target in that area. And so there's a high probability that we'll be able to chase the Tyro vein a few hundred meters to the northeast, where it will intersect a totally new structural environment, and that's the Frisco Graben. To the left and to the southwest, just a short distance off this particular view, we would see the Sheep Trail Fault and the Sunrise vein, which is a few hundred meters long and about 50 to 60 meters wide of parallel chalcedony quartz veinlets with low-level gold values. We think there's a high probability that that's an extension of the Tyro vein, although it's been dissected somewhat by these east-west and northwest trending faults related to the dikes. So we're looking forward to developing that model, and we actually think we'll be able to push the Tyro vein off to a few kilometers to the southwest and be able to structurally reconstruct it to where it is part of the Sunset vein system that we drilled back in 2021.
And then now we'll talk about the other 6 holes we drilled, which are at Sheep Trail and Boulevard. And so, Rob, you and I, prior to drilling, were both pretty excited about Sheep Trail because of the high grade sampling. Maybe talk about a little bit what we saw in the drilling, and then what we probably need to do to figure out what's where the disconnect is.
Yeah, you bet, Derek. We drilled 6 holes, 3 at the Boulevard Mine, further to the east there, and then at the Sheep Trail, more into the center part. And these holes were designed to test below areas where we had seen good results from our rock sampling. At the Boulevard, the area we tested, most of the values in there were, in the 1 to 3 gram range, but a robust vein system, a lot of hydrothermal breccias, multiple events. And what we saw in the holes was consistent with that. Yet we did not pull the types of the levels, the gold grades that I was anticipating, but yet we saw broad zones of what we call damage filled by quartz veining. As we know from our work and the reports in the Oatman district and throughout the region, that these types of veins contain several stages of quartz. And so each stage has its different levels of gold grades, and that the presence or absence of good values may only reflect the presence or absence of that particular stage. So we're going to be working on that. We have a lot more information we can compile here and get a better sense of what's going on. The same can be said about the Sheep Trail area where we tested the Golden Elbow, because at the surface, it's a very broad zone, 15 to 30 meters wide, of strong veins up to several meters wide. And we encountered locally strong mineralization, but not see the elevated values as observed at the surface. I don't have an explanation for that now, but it certainly warrants additional attention, because I like this area. It's a large area of alteration in the rhyolite dikes. It's a large area of veining. And even though we don't see the amount of open space that we see on the Tyro is a northeast trending structure, and I think that's a more favorable direction for open space and the development of wider veins. These northwest, west-northwest, east-west trending veins that follow the dike system create large zones of veining or damage zones and huge areas of alteration consistent with the model down in Oatman. So I remain very optimistic about this area.
Yeah, definitely. Still, I guess the summary is still perspective, but more work to do. So
Absolutely more work to do.
if anyone wants to get a hold of us, we're very accessible. Reach out to me and we can set up a call with myself and Rob to talk about these results. Thank you very much.
Thank you.